Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. I'm Richard Jacobs, Executive Director of the nonprofit Finding Genius Foundation and host of the Finding Genius Podcast. In late 2016, I was rear-ended at 65 miles an hour by a truck on the highway, which sent me off-road into a ditch. The impact of the collision gave me a concussion and other injuries. At the hospital, a CT scan showed that I had thyroid nodules, which turned out to be cancer. It was then, when I had a biopsy of my neck, that I realized even if I was a millionaire, I wouldn't want a second or a third biopsy due to the pain and the invasiveness of it. And appointments at that time for thyroid experts were 3 to 6 months out. And I was worried about dying now, even if that was irrational. So because of this, I've decided to raise money to conduct a literature review on steroids, on the causes of anxiety and depression, a condition that affects well over 50 million people in the United States and hundreds of millions worldwide. Our goal is to create a codex, a guide that reveals all possible treatments for anxiety and depression for people that live with the condition, or for loved ones that have it, as my wife and my son do. To find out more about our fundraiser, visit findinggeniusfoundation.org and click on current initiatives. And now, to our guest.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have Scott Leifer. He's a founder and CEO of Wake Up Sense Holistic Healing. We're going to talk about his personal struggles with anxiety and depression and why he started the company and what the company does. So, Scott, thank you for coming.
Hey, thank you so much, Rich. I appreciate it.
If you would, tell me a bit about your background. How did you come to, be concerned about anxiety and depression? What's your background?
It's a good question, Rich. I think, looking back now, it's been, 14 years ago since I threw my last med down the toilet. But, looking back, I think just because of the nature of my job, I was a commodity trader in a previous life. So led a pretty high stress life in my 20s and 30s. And looking back on it, I think that's a lot of it is what kind of led to some of my, the breakdown of my body and adrenal system and everything else, the cellular functions of your body. Now that I know what I know, that certainly led to some of it for sure. So in my 20s and 30s, I really did lead a pretty high stress life.
Can you give a few details about what made your life stressful or difficult, or what put you into anxiety and depression? Was it you've always had it, or were there events in your life that caused it?
Yeah, again, it's a compilation of things. I mean, the reality is, without getting on a huge soapbox here, everybody has, what they call situational depression. And that is just, divorce, money issues, teens struggle with, all the time. It just depends on what's happening in your life. You'll have situations come up where people have melancholy thoughts. But unfortunately, mine turned into what they call endogenous. And this is part of the fallacy, Rich, is that, Western medicine doesn't even understand what endogenous depression is. They don't know how to diagnose it, and they certainly don't know how to treat it. The reality is my body started breaking down, I really believe, in my 30s. I was a commodity trader, literally, just sitting on if you can envision one of those floors, right, where there's 30 guys and lights are going off all day. And I mean, from the time you sat down to the time you went home, it was just a lot of high stress, people screaming in your ear all day. I mean, there just wasn't a calm time, during the day. So again, when you're young, you just push through it, right? And you just think I can handle any amount of stress. And there were years that, I'd make a couple $100,000 as a 25-year-old. And there were years I would go in the hole by 30 grand. It was just a very, very stressful money time in my life, for sure.
Yeah, I wonder if all those repeated stressful events day in and day out, like burned out your adrenals and kind of maybe short-circuited your stress response. What do you think?
Yep. No, you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, without, again, getting too technical on the soapbox, the reality is everybody has situational depression. And when I say that, it really starts, Rich, at about age 3 to 8. And this is stuff I learned after I started building the company. Again, I was totally uneducated 13, 14 years ago. That's why I went on, 4 classes of very dangerous medications, like most of the world is still in a benumbed figure 8 doing it today. But yes, you're absolutely right. Your body does start to break down. Everybody, I mean, absolutely everybody, Rich, walking the face of the earth has some sort of fear or internalized anger in their system. and it happens between age 3 and 8. Remember, when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, right, losing a cat can be stressful. It can be damaging to your heart, to your soul structure, to your adrenal system, your brain. But again, you're not equipped, right, at age 5 to deal with that. So you just suppress it. Well, then you go through your teen years, right? More stress happens. We all know how much, stress teens are under these days with social media and everything going on, that they're being, under attack every single day. But the reality is, and then you get married, right? You have kids, you have job struggle. I mean, whatever the struggles are for you, most people don't ever deal with that when they're young. Like I didn't, because I just figured, hey, I'll push through it. I'm strong. I'm young. But you're right. Eventually your body, there's a very famous book called Your Body Keeps the Score. And mine broke down at about age 38. And most people do start breaking down somewhere between their mid 30s and mid 40s, depending on, again, the stressors of their life.
What does that mean you broke down? If it's up to you if you want to talk about it. If not, it's all right. But what was the breakdown moment? What happened?
No. I mean, again, I'm a beacon out there of, that's why I started my company. I think depressed people are way too isolated. They feel shame. The reality is, Rich, as you know, God forbid, if somebody gets a heart attack or cancer in your family, what do people do? They rally around you. But boy, if you've got depression and anxiety, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I can't talk to that person. What's going on? They're crazy. That's just the way the societal norming is. But for me, like I said, it just started breaking down. I was 38 years old. I can see it like it was yesterday. Sitting in my favorite restaurant, took the day off. It was my birthday, and just reading the paper and just ordered my sausage and eggs. And I literally thought that day I was going to die. My heart started pounding out of my chest. I was shaking. I about fell to the floor. I went from the chair to kind of one of their little areas and just kind of sat down. And remember, this is in a restaurant. So talk about a 38-year-old alpha male looking pretty stupid, right? Sitting in a restaurant that, next I knew, the ambulance was there, took me to the hospital, ran countless tests. And at the end of the day, I walked out with, my first class of meds, and they said, you just had an anxiety attack. But, back then I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew that I thought I was going to die that day. I literally thought that was it.
Jeez, that's terrible.
Yeah, it was horrible.
So what led you to start this company then? When did that transition occur, and what was that like?
Yeah, so I was on meds for about, I want to say 3.5 to 4 years. And again, it's the same thing. They put you on a med. You might feel some, temporary relief, and, you have some side effects. They give you another med, and all of a sudden I was on 4. Wasn't feeling well at all. I was just kind of existing and getting through the days and, raising children. I knew I wasn't being that great of a dad and, father and husband at that point. But it really started to change when I knew something just had to change. It was hard. I'm a gym rat. It was very hard to even get up and go to the gym anymore. Another instance I can remember like was yesterday. My daughter was 4, I think, at the time. She asked me to go to the park, and I came home at 5 and I couldn't even do it. I mean, Rich, you want to talk about shame in your heart, right? You can't even take your 4-year-old to the park because you're just not feeling well. So yeah, I think I was 42 at the time, and I literally got up one morning, just felt like my head was going to pop off my shoulders. I looked myself in the mirror and I said, I'm going to figure this out, or I'm going to die trying. I'm going to get off these meds. I don't care what it takes. I'm not listening to psychiatrists. I'm not listening to doctors. I'm a pretty headstrong alpha male, just a simple guy from Iowa. And I said, that's it. I'm going to figure this out. And that's what I did. I quit my corporate job, and I started to research and document why the hell do we only see meds on, 5 o'clock news when there's a whole nother holistic arena out there that's been helping, high net worth individuals, actors, attorneys, basketball players for years, but it had just never been mainstream. And it really bothered me to the core of who I was.
No, that's excellent. What's the premise of your company then?
Yeah. So the reality is everything is based off what's called orthomolecular science. Now, don't get caught up in the word. It's just a fancy word for cellular penetration of nutrients to the cells of your body. Again, this is something that's been around forever. Linus Pauling, a very famous doctor of orthomolecular science, started researching and documenting this way back in the 30s and 40s. And there's been many, many people since then. One of the doctors on my board he's one of the top 100 orthomolecular science in the world. He helped me formulate one of the products called Revive that, starts to change the biochemistry in your brain all naturally, not with like the drugs that cross the blood-brain barrier from Big Pharma. So the impetus of it is orthomolecular science, intracellular healing, and intense psychotherapy online. So what I really did was shatter the walls of therapy that say, hey, we've got to have this, magic pink pill, right, to go in. And that's what they do, right? You turn on your 5 o'clock news. What do you see? Fancy magic pills that they just think if you pop this, everything's going to get better. No, the body doesn't work that way. The body has to have cellular penetration of nutrients. You have to release the endogenous depression, and that's what our 28-day online program does, because endogenous literally has changed the biochemistry in your brain. And just like it changed mine, if I would have stayed on those pills, I know I would have been dead. There's just no question about it.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
What does that mean, endogenous depression? I understand that good nutrition would definitely help someone feel better, but what does that mean to you, endogenous depression? What are you getting out of yourself? What are you changing in your body?
Yeah. So like I said, depression, and again, you're not going to hear this in your doctor's office because, again, I went on a 10-year, research and documentation of why this wasn't mainstream. The reality is doctors aren't necessarily bad people. They're just not trained in a modality to heal. So endogenous depression literally means fear or anger or both internalized into the soft tissue of your body. Okay. It's as real as the sunshine. But again, you'll never hear this in your doctor's office because they're trained to give you a drug. So endogenous just means that fear or anger has latched itself to the soft tissue of your body. It starts to break down your adrenal system. And that's why you start feeling the brain fog, the melancholy thoughts, the suicidal thoughts, the foggy brain that I had forever, which drove me absolutely crazy. Here I'm in my 30s and I had a foggy brain. I'm like, this is not right. Do I have Alzheimer's? I mean, all these stuff just goes through your brain, but that's how it starts to get it out. Intense psychotherapy online through video and very detailed writing structures will help you release that. So there's terminology, again, that you'll never hear in your mainstream called tension myositis syndrome. Again, as real as the sunshine, but again, you will never hear this in the mainstream. That's why I started my company, because it manifests in your body somewhere, right? So stress, we all deal with it every day. Some manifest in your shoulders, some in your legs, some in your gut. That's why people have digestion issues. That in of itself is called tension myositis syndrome. And you will start manifesting it somewhere in your body. And if it gets bad enough, like mine did, that's endogenous depression. It changed the biochemistry, changed the structures of my body, including my heart, everything. Heart, pancreas, all the organs of my body were literally changed. And that's why I was having so many symptoms.
I mean, maybe it's a ridiculous question, but how do you know that? How do you know all these parts of your body would change? Is it because once you started with better nutrition, a whole host of symptoms went away? So that was your thinking, or how did you realize this?
Yeah, no, it's not a ridiculous question at all. It's a question that we all have, right? If you've ever suffered from depression. So again, I'm trying to keep this, I know we don't have 10 hours to talk about this, but the reality is when I started researching, right, I found out things that you just would never hear in your doctor's office, that you could actually prove the efficacy by doing blood work, right? So for instance, there's one simple test called cortisol AM. And cortisol AM is a test that literally will tell you how much stress you're carrying inside of your body. Okay, stress has to go somewhere. Most men are adrenaline dominant. Adrenaline is an anger hormone. And that was one of the things that I was carrying huge, was I had way too much cortisol in my system. I don't remember the number now, but it was way off the charts, like 300 or 400. And I think an average cortisol men's test in the morning is like 30 or 40 or something. Mine was 300 or 400. So to answer your question succinctly, that's what we started doing. Was I said, when I start pushing this stuff to the market, we've got to also have a company that I need to contract with, like a Labs Direct, so that we can basically prove this through blood work. Vitamin D is another one. Vitamin D deficiency is absolutely a pandemic in this country, but most people don't realize it. And that is another precursor which leads to depression. So all this stuff you can prove. Progesterone is another one. Progesterone is a huge one for women. If people have any takeaway from this whatsoever, progesterone is the number one precursor in women that leads to postpartum depression. But again, you'll never hear this in the Western medicine. They will typically prescribe toxic estrogen, which women's bodies never stop making estrogen. You would never, ever want to give a woman estrogen because it's toxic. So again, this is just little tidbits I'm giving you, stuff that I learned in better part of over a decade now of being around this orthomolecular brilliance, I call it, that should be mainstream. And that's the whole premise of my company, is shattering what big pharma is doing to people that are good people, but they don't know any better. They just think that, popping a big pharma pill is the answer, and it's not. I did it. It does not work.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
What's the protocol of someone that comes to you that's new? What journey do they go through? What do they take? I know it's different for everybody, but in general, what do people do?
Yeah, it is and isn't. I mean, men and women will have a slightly different protocol. Brand new people that come, there's really two modes to that. Number one, if they just find me cold, which a lot of people do. When I mean cold, I mean just find me on the internet, they Google me, whatever. There's several testimonies on my website. I do not pay actors, anything like that. These are real people who suffered just like I did. So, but it depends on the analytics of the person. And what I mean by that is some people are extremely analytical. They want to know every single thing that's in it, in their body. How do I do this? We would do what we call a full health intake on them. They just, do it online. Other people are like me. I was just suffering so bad. I mean, had this been around, when I was suffering for no more than I charged for my products, I would have bought, in a heartbeat to try this. So they just like, hey, I just need to feel better. For anonymity purposes, I don't want anybody knowing I'm taking this product. They just start taking it and they start feeling better. And that's when I start, getting the emails and calls and people crying and like, God, Scott, why doesn't my doctor know about this? So it really depends on the person.
So how would you describe the products that you offer in the nutrition space? What do they look like? What are some of the products examples?
Yeah, so probably the two flagship are the Revive. The Revive is a formulated product, again, through orthomolecular science. We ran clinical trials on this through what's called the Beck's test standardization of mental health. There's not one, and I repeat, there's not one pharma drug that has ever went through the Beck's test, provability through the FDA. It doesn't exist. It's a corrupt system. We took this and actually did clinical trials on it when we formulated it. And that's why it, again, works so well and changes the biochemistry all naturally in your body. That's one product. Number two, I already mentioned, is progesterone. Progesterone, number one precursor in women for depression. Also number one precursor in men because of the adrenaline dominance in men, which is an anger hormone. It was off the charts for me, which is why I was always angry and depressed. Progesterone lowers the adrenaline in men. And if you look out today, all this road rage going on, 90% of it is men. If they had progesterone, I will guarantee you overnight, literally, that would stop or at least lessen.
What have men told you, or you, like when you've taken progesterone, what do they feel like? What do they experience differently?
Instantly calm. That's the only way to say it. You just feel calm. I literally just, right before I got in here with you, because I know how to manage my adrenaline now. See, that's the fallacy, right? We never explain any of this from doctors. But actually, because I'm an entrepreneur, high adrenaline dominant men are the most creative men. They're typically entrepreneurs. That's the positive side of it. And if you know how to manage it, that turns into creative energy. But if you don't know how to manage it and cortisol is shooting out of your body, which is a stress hormone, then what's got to happen? You get angry. You yell at your kids. You have road rage. You shoot guns on the weekend. Whatever. It happens every single day. And that's so wrong in this country. And it's just sickening what's going on. All the shootings, beatings, killings, all this crap going on, if they would ever pull a toxicology report, I will guarantee you 95% would have those blood-brain barrier dangerous drugs in their system.
Interesting. What are some of the other products that you have, and how do they affect people?
Yeah, so those are the two. There's two more from there, and then the online program. Another one is called DK Ultra. I kind of alluded to it already. Vitamin D is, you just can't synthesize enough from the sun anymore because of global warming. You can't. I don't care if you laid out there all day long every day for, a year, you would still probably be deficient in vitamin D. And obviously that's not, the greatest for your skin. So, but vitamin D, and here's the fallacy again, vitamin D by itself cannot be synthesized into the body without a chelation factor. Chelation factor is another fancy term for, think of it as like gas and oil, right? They're great separately, but don't they sure work better in unison, to run a car or run whatever? That's exactly what's going on in the supplement industry, which is just as corrupt as big pharma, because vitamin D is water soluble. You could sit and take 50,000 IUs a day, and unless it has a chelation factor, your vitamin D level would not go up 1 point. It pisses right through your body. So what we do is chelate it.
Crazy.
It's called K2, which is another nutrient. but it has to be in synergistic form called MK7. That's what drives the vitamin D to the cells of your body. That's what, in a nutshell, what orthomolecular science is. And it's been around forever. It's as powerful as the sunshine. It can heal people tomorrow. That's why I started my company. And then the last one is called a BP plus D. It's a milk thistle and cinnamon mix. Again, pandemic that's going on that most people don't realize. 1 in 4 people, especially men, have fatty livers. Fatty liver is as dangerous as, alcoholic liver. So what it does is it basically lowers the liver enzymes in your body, because milk thistle and cinnamon together flushes out toxins quicker than anything you could take. But again, you see all these fancy, liver detox. I walk down to my GNC here or my Whole Foods, and there's just, oh my God, there's probably 50 or 60 fancy liver crap that just, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I wonder which ones are good and not good and why. What have you seen?
There's no science behind it whatsoever. I can sum it up in 1 word, 2 words, fancy marketing. That's all it is. We don't buy into that. Everything I've done on my site, everything I've researched, everything I've documented. I went 2 years, Rich, to show you how serious I was about this. I knew I was going to go broke doing it because I had to get well. That was priority number 1. It really was not to make money. It was to get back to being a good father and husband. But, I went 2 years without selling anything because I knew I had to document all of this. It had to have chelation. It had to have clinical. There had to be provability, or who's going to follow something, or I would just be another, pill on the shelf, so to speak, at a Whole Foods. And I was not willing to do that. So those are the 4 products. And then last, but certainly not least, is, I already alluded to it a little bit, but is our 28-day online program backed by board certification doctor who's been helping people for 35 years release that endogenous depression. So those in consort with the supplements and the online intense psychotherapy and other breathing exercises we give you, that's why we have the success rate we do. People don't ask for their money back, even though I offer a money back guarantee. They get well.
So are these pills, or these powders or tinctures, or what form do the supplements take?
I mean, we could do others, but right now it's all pill form. And then obviously the program online it's video based. And then it's also a lot of writing exercises. And the last thing that I think I mentioned, but maybe we just glossed over it was, I don't take anything just, at face value, because that's what Big Pharma does. We actually prove it by blood work. So there's the last fallacy in the industry that you've got to go to a doctor and pay all the premiums and all that crap. You don't. You can pull lab work right from my site. So for instance, if you're a man, right, and you're having issues with anger and adrenaline dominance, you start taking my progesterone, you start taking my Revive. 2 months later, 3 months later, you want to go on and pull your own blood work to see if Scott was crazy, pull your own blood work. It'll tell you exactly what your vitamin D levels are, or your cortisol levels are, whatever you want to pull.
Okay. When people start on your program, how long before they start telling you the effects that they feel something?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to say it like this, and I'm going to oversimplify a little bit, but Rich, it's kind of like this. If, I started out where most of my market was, let's say 45 years of age and older women who have been through not only childbirth, but perimenopause or menopause because of the progesterone. So not joking, you can get on Amazon, you can get on my site, you can look anywhere. I mean, I've literally had women call me in a day, crying their eyes out saying, they literally scream, why doesn't my doctor know this? I've been dealing with this for 20 years. And they just write these books of reviews like, Scott, I don't know what you're doing, but it's brilliant. Why doesn't my doctor know about this? They're just so pissed off that the doctor that they've trusted for 20 years hasn't helped them. Okay, that's one example. Men, again, are typically have more egos involved, right? They're too isolated. They're alpha males. They may not call me for, or email me for a month or 2 or whatever, because they fight it more. Men just typically do. It's just their, I call it their blocked response of ego. But again, once their adrenaline starts lowering and the cortisol level comes down.
Yeah, you were saying men will take a while because they're stubborn, like you said, a blocked response. So when they do come back to you, what do the men say?
Yeah, so typically men, again, are suffering from adrenaline dominance, and which typically leads to depression. The first thing they always say is, I just feel more calm after taking the progesterone. They feel like the foggy brain is starting to lessen. They don't want to be so isolated because, I'm an alpha male. I'm a guy. I suffered from this. All I wanted to do when I was suffering was just be by myself, work, sit in my office by myself. I didn't want to, I think that's just a man response. Whereas women are more social with it. They want to talk about it. And it's not a right or wrong. It's just an is. But the reality is we can help both. So, depending on the cellular structure and what's going on with their body, that's why we created the 4 products and the the online program.
Okay. I was going to joke and say your customers hopefully are lifers. You do such a good job. They want to stick with you, right? For life.
Most of them are. I rarely ever get somebody calling me or emailing me and saying I wasn't helped, or, typically with stuff like this, because again, people are more isolated. I certainly was when I was Googling, get me off my meds and all that. Two schools of thought: no news is usually good news, or they become raving fans where they want to hold up the banner just like I do and say, let's crush Big Pharma.
Yeah. How can people find out more? And, what's the website and where can they go, and how do they evaluate what to take? Like, what's your process?
Yeah. So it's just, I'll just spell it out. It's just wakeupsense.com, WAKEUPSENSE, just wakeupsense, all one word.com. It's an our website. I mean, you can get on there. And I think the thing we do extremely well, and we have changed some things over the years, is we become very, very enthralled, I'll call it, in the provability of what we do. So we got to build it for everybody, right? So there's analytical people out there who want to study. What the heck is this? What's it based off of? Is this just another fancy pill that Scott's, so, but on the other side of it, there's also just the quick, hey, get the products, try it, leave us your review, leave us a contact information. We will get back to you. I'm obviously extremely busy. I have a staff, but I still make personal phone calls to people because I know what it's like to suffer. To this day, I still do it.
No, that's great. Great. Well, very good. Thank you for coming on the podcast and talking about this. And, I encourage listeners to check it out and see what they think.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rich. I appreciate it a lot.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.